Thank you all for joining us tonight. And we are exceptionally privileged tonight to have with us as our speaker a gentleman who has been with us on a number of firsts at FAU Tech Runway, but also at FAU more broadly. The first want to mention that one of the first unrelated to our speaker is that tonight's event is presented with closed captioning for the hearing impaired. I want to thank one of our entrepreneurs in the current class and also Sean Chessel for making that happen. It's something we hope to offer all future events to help awareness, but also to promote participation by all of our talented entrepreneurs and supporters. Also want to thank Tech Runways, all of our supporters to make events like this possible. And in the future, we'll have a list of those. So without further ado, Mr. Scott Adams is our speaker this evening. Scott is, when the word serial entrepreneur, it's thrown around loosely, but with Scott, it fits better than your best suit could possibly fit. He founded a company called Vario, which you'll hear about later. Sold that to, Highway Technologies, which was sold to Vario. And after that, he was a very successful investor, executive chair, and actually ran an incubator himself, producing companies like Emergent and Mobile Health, two very, very big successes. And now this is probably Scott's third or fourth or fifth, I lose count, venture now with STRAX Intelligence Group. But we hope to hear more about that this evening. Scott is also a huge friend of FAU. He gave the naming gift to the College of Business's Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. And it was a very significant gift. It showed a great deal of leadership and his passion for entrepreneurial education and for all things FAU. After all, he is an alumni as a proud owl himself. He's also a charter member of FAU Tech Runway's advisory board. And my predecessor, Kim Graham, who may be listening in tonight, recruited Scott to participate. And so he's been with Tech Runway since day one, also as its very first company. Before it was under air, before it was enclosed, before it was converted from a warehouse, Scott was in there starting his next company, which has now become STRAX Intelligence Group. So nobody could be more chartered than Mr. Adams. Finally, I just want to say there's probably not a greater friend to entrepreneurs. Scott is a rare class of serial entrepreneur that is exceptionally humble, modest, and eager to give back. It comes from his heart. Many times during the year, he meets with entrepreneurs who many are at various stages of their development and their growth path, and just willing to give them his time and insights without asking anything in return. And it comes from who he is. And so we're thrilled tonight that he's also going to give us a couple hours of his time. The first hour is open to the public and to all the members of Venture Class 8 within FAU Tech Runway's program. And at the end of that hour, so Scott will talk for about 35, 40 minutes. Then we'll go to about 10 minutes of Q&A with the audience being the public. And then we'll end the public portion. We'll take a 10-minute break. And then all the venture class companies will have a private session with Mr. Adams. If that's not clear, we'll clarify as we go. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Scott Adams.
Reese, thank you so much for the kind words in the intro. Can you hear me okay? Everything good?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess I'm here today just to offer some of the sharing some of the knowledge and the experiences that I've had, and but also I think it's important that I can try to get maybe some feedback. I don't know if we can get any interjections from people who are listening. Is there any specific things that you would like to ask me now or to discuss? I've got the screen I'm watching for it if you want to post anything, and if not, I'll just kind of ramble on and just
quick editorial note. Sorry, Scott, forgive me for interrupting. We're going to ask the viewers to use the Q&A option at the bottom of the screens, not the chat option. If they could use the Q&A and type their questions, that will be the preferred route. So thank you.
Okay. All right. And I do have the Q&A window open too, so we can see it, but I guess, okay. So I guess you're all here for a common element. We're all here because we have an interest in being a entrepreneur or interested in technology, interested in startups, and or maybe some of you might be just um, or want to explore this avenue as you kind of are furthering your knowledge in your uh, education. But I can tell you one thing: as for any successful entrepreneur will say, is that being an entrepreneur is about learning, and if you stop learning, you will quickly be a dinosaur, because I tell you, and especially in the technology field, as we can see, it is evolving very quickly. And also, if you look at our current environment that are living in, and just we cannot predict really what's going to happen, and each of these things happening in the macro world today will have an impact to what businesses or what our business models are going to be. So this is a very interesting time for the new members of the class, to coming in and just kind of looking at how are you going to adjust and change, or in some cases maybe have to completely do a pivot. But one thing is for sure, that there's only one way to find out, and I think one of the most important things you can do as an entrepreneur is to make your mistakes early, and try to make your mistakes, if they're little mistakes, fix them. And it's easy. The only way you're going to learn is you're going to have to take a chance and put yourself out there. So anyway, I think one of the things that to be a successful entrepreneur is you can't be afraid to take that first step. So and that means you can't be afraid to fail, because you will probably fail. We all fail. But I have a saying is, I may not always win, but I will never lose. Meaning that, I'm going to learn from the mistakes or the failures, and just adjust and move on. And sometimes those, I call them failures or learning moments, those, or being humbled by someone else, is nothing is more memorable than getting your butt handed to you by a company or a person or whatever. You just lose. But that just means how quickly you get up, and then you figure out what's going to be your next step to pay the favor back to someone else next time, or to the same company that you lost to. So anyway, I think the other important thing, I think, is to look back and try to look at yourself, and just realize, what are your strengths, what are your what are your weaknesses as well, and also how you want to supplement the weaknesses with your strengths. Meaning, forming a team around you to help to fill those spots in, and in many cases, and some people never learn, is they don't know what they don't know. So by acknowledging what you're not good at, and try to, obviously you want to improve on those areas, but some cases, you're never going to be good at some things. It's just not it's not in your deck of cards, which is okay, but that's why you just need to work through that, or be sure you hand that to someone else. And obviously, to be a good entrepreneur, you got to do a lot of things and wear a lot of hats. And one of my favorite things to do is to fire myself. Of course, I may be wearing 5 or 6 hats at the beginning, but then over time, it's time to bring a pro in and let them run it. And there's nothing more rewarding than to watch, once you started something, and to watch, bringing in a pro and watch them take that area that helped, and watch them take it to the next level and actually show how it could really start to scale. To me, that is very rewarding. That means that it's a very positive sign when you can get to that level. Because most of you, when you're starting off, there's going to be a few of you. It's a handful, and that's a really scary moment. And about how you want to or how you feel, and I think one of the last presentations I did, this is maybe 6 months ago, when we were in person actually, and I was surprised how some of the questions I asked me about how I felt about being with anxiety, because I was explaining to them how I suffer from anxiety because I worry about things. I don't sleep, and they all the feedback was, well, good. I was really happy to hear you say it, because I feel the same way, and it really wanted to bring that up to all of you, that it is perfectly normal to be doing what you're setting out to do, to being a little nervous or a lot nervous, and maybe sometimes some of us are better at handling that than others. But I tell you, we're in it's a very pressure. This is very difficult to do. There's not really a rule book for each one of you. Has a different business that you're trying to start, has a different problem you're trying to solve, and a different set of dynamics. So it's perfectly normal to feel very scared, and but sometimes fear can also drive us to work harder and to achieve more than if we just relaxed. So I think using that as a tool, and just understanding it's okay to feel that way.
Can I ask a quick question? You've managed through and lived through the dot-com meltdown, the financial crisis of '07, a couple wars, and the current pandemic. How do entrepreneurs make it through? What do they have to do differently, or any advice on weathering through a significant turmoil in the business community or in the economy?
It is I guess I'm really not sure exactly how to answer that, because I'm just kind of going through my mind really quick, and to rewind about all the different types of experiences I've had, but just to be able to be nimble, and and to steer the ship, and sometimes also to hold your course. Because if something we feel is going to be short term, you're going to have to take some chances and say, you know what, I'm going to ride through this. I'm not going to panic, because the last thing you want to do, if you have a good strategy, but there is a short-term, set of influences that's affecting people making buying decisions or raising money. For example, when you go through a big market crash or a recession or a big downturn, and you're in the middle of raising funds, no one wants to write a check. So you have to be ready to ride through those until people start feeling at ease again. Sometimes that's a month, a week, or probably 6 months. So you have to be prepared to adjust, and then also to adjust your spending, or to uh, cut back, or to downsize if you have to. I also got a question up there, Reese, as well. I just saw someone asked a question about government and local public contracts. I can answer that. I think our first government contract came because we really had a unique proposition when we first started off for relating to the drones, and we were really early with drones. So we were able to secure a sole source path, and then we were able to expand and broaden out our capabilities and our features once we got in the door. So some of that is also getting the right connections, because generally the getting into the government world, a lot of times it's not what you know, it is who you know. And then it depends on what the procurement cycle is. You got to know if it's something you can do a sole source or a single source, or if it's going to be a bid situation, and then there's, every agency has their own way of doing things, and it's just slow too. It just takes a long time. The government moves slowly, and it's not necessarily an efficient process by any means. And I don't even think it's fair, but you just have to scrap. You have to fight. You have to find what your angle is, and also work on the relationships of between knowing who the decision makers are as well. So that's a complicated a question to answer really quickly in a forum like this, but it's this is kind of my first venture I'm doing with STRAX right now, where we're pretty much, our main customers are in the government space, and I can tell you right now, it's the hardest space to get into by far of any other venture I've done before. Okay, so and yes, I just read the next comment. I was a student at FAU. This is before they had any entrepreneurship classes or curriculum, but and that was one of the things that I wanted to do as soon as I had the opportunity to make, to write an endowment or a check of some sort. My first check I ever wrote for a donation was to FAU, because I figured if I did not have the basic knowledge of the core things that I learned at FAU, I would not have been able to be to have a chance of starting a business and being successful. And I was fortunate to do that very early by starting my first company. Was the internet company was Highway Technologies in 1995, and that was the other key. There was the wave, and this is where everyone has a period of luck. You have to be lucky, but you also have to work hard to make that luck. But that window of opportunity that we had at Highway was the internet, and that was the big new thing that was just starting off. How do you use the internet? And we started off at multiple things. At the beginning, we wanted to be an ISP for a service provider, and then we couldn't get anyone to loan us the money for doing that. And the next thing we did was, he found out, what can we do with the money we had? So we decided to be a web hosting company, because my partner at the time, Bill, uh, was the programmer, and I was the guy who was, supposedly, I answered the phone. But we got into doing web hosting because we saw there was a niche there for people wanting to launch their own websites for without paying and buying their own servers and stuff. So we essentially made a cloud. This is before we called it the cloud. So and then we put multiple accounts and let them share one box securely, and then eventually we got to put thousands of customers on one box. And then we discovered, sort of by accident, that our business model was, let's charge $50 as a one-time setup fee so we can afford to buy new equipment, and then let's charge 3 months in advance, because I needed 3 months to figure out how I was going to bill them the second time. So that's the reason why we started doing the 3 months in advance. But then we realized, hey, that was like free money that was in our bank account, and that helped us fuel the growth between the setup fee. So that was a little bit of luck of picking a business model, and then getting lucky also, working hard with Bill's work, that we can put 2,000 or 3,000 customers on a box, making 2,000 times $25 a month times 2,000 times $50 one-time setup fee. Do the math, and then you get 50 servers going. That starts to print some cash. We're making money when we're sleeping. So that's another thing about is we like the reoccurring revenue model. So I kind of learned from that. My first venture is I like the reoccurring models better, because it's in building a platform to support that model, because that can really scale. Otherwise, you have to earn a new sale each time if you're selling a widget. There's nothing wrong with widgets. You got to sell a lot of them, but also, selling hardware, a lot of things can go wrong with hardware. And then if they do go wrong, you have to update firmware, you have to deal with security, you may have to do recalls, and so my first venture was probably my smartest one when I knew the least. So, but looking back in retrospect, that's what I can say. There was a little bit of luck there. We made some good decisions early. We became profitable really in the first year. We started small. We grew slowly. We have a crawl, walk, run approach of growing within a controllable way to keep the quality up. And then we rapidly expanded to multiple business channels. We did a partner channel as well to distribute the risk out between direct and indirect. And so we figured that out. And then we went international, was another key. It was probably the third element of our strategy. So we went international quickly because of the internet. And then we were able to find, we started doing an IPO a couple of years later, and then in 3.5, 4 years, we sold the company. Before our IPO, another publicly traded company, Vario, came up and made us some offers we couldn't refuse. So, and then you got to look back, is saying, wow, we could have stuck at it. We could be, Amazon today. Yeah, maybe I sold too early. But at the same time, there were a lot of companies that didn't sell, and they thought they were going to take it themselves and go the whole way. And then they end up, if someone else makes a better trap than they do, then you may be left with nothing. So that's always going to be a decision that every entrepreneur has to make, and it's good to have a good sort of exit strategy coming in and think about that early. What is your end game? Or some cases you may want to just keep it. You may say, well, I want to do this for the rest of my life. In some cases, you can do that, or or if you do get investors come in and take outside money, well, then they're going to want to return too. So you really need an exit strategy so you can pay them back. Because once you take money from outside people, you have a real fiduciary responsibility to not only, look out for the company as, as an executive and a founder, an entrepreneur, but also you have to look after their money too, because they're putting that money in with expectations and promises that you've made to them about making a profit. Unless you're a nonprofit from the start and they're not expecting their money back. But then I don't know if I would call them an investor. I would call them a donor then. So. A little bit about, and then Reese kind of helped me with the time too. So
yeah, we've got about well, we're kind of we mixed in the Q&A piece with the others, so we have left for your portion with the public about 20 minutes left, since we're doing Q&A anyway as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, another question about talking about the difference between raising external funds and bootstrapping. Is I always think it's best if you could bootstrap in the beginning, and because raising money is hard to do. It requires a lot of legal work that has to be done to do it right. A lot of maintenance, and a lot of time for reporting back and communicating back to the investors on a regular basis. There's a lot of reporting requirements that you have with accounting and making sure things are done right. You have liability from being sued. If someone, people can sue you for anything. You could do everything right and still get sued because they can say, well, hey, I didn't make a profit, so I'm going to sue you because you didn't do it right. You should have made money. So just, be careful. And one of my first, the mentor I had, who was a lawyer, he said, just before you ever give one share of stock away or sell one share of stock, be very careful. If you can avoid it, avoid having to raise money. But unfortunately, we in most cases, most of us, well, including me, even in my ventures today, I put in my own money. So I think it's good to put your money first, put your money up, because I never will ask someone to put money in my venture if I haven't put money in too. And also it's best to bootstrap in the beginning, because then you need to prove your business model early, because just because it works throwing money at a bad business model just makes you lose money faster. So I think proving the business model can work in a little way, a small way, then it really helps to prove that it can scale when you start to apply more funds to it. And it helps you figure out that business model, that first business model, because there's a lot of adjustments you're going to have to do to figure out the pricing, to figure out your costs, just figure out your service or your product, or how to do the support. There's just, because you don't really know how much it's going to cost you really when you get started until you really start to get your product out there. So another question here, talking about the difficult relationships on founders when the visions don't align. I think that is always going to be something that can change. I don't know how many businesses I've seen have failed because of the early stage founders don't get along. And if you don't have a way to exit or to separate from each other, sometimes it needs to be you figure it out, or you pick different roles. And then a lot of times also things will change, because I personally have taken many roles, not always as the CEO, or maybe I start off as the CEO, but then I'll quickly change to something else. So I don't expect to have one role. And then I think as founders, you can guarantee that, give it a couple years, it won't be the same anymore. Something will change at some level, or the dynamics will. Because starting off, you may not have a board, but then later on, as you get bigger, especially raise money, you'll need to have a board to helping you make your important decisions. And it's not just the two founders or three founders or whoever's, sitting at, having a beer, writing notes on a napkin, but that's the way it usually starts out. So I think you just have to just be honest and fair, and then also kind of decide what's going to be best for the entity, and what's going to be best for the shareholders on how the founders need to figure out a way to transition themselves.
Scott, can I add an additional question to that, related to that? Sometimes among co-founders, one of the co-founders' situations may change. They might have an illness in the family that they have to attend to, or it may be that everyone thought they had the skills, or they had the time, or they had the commitment, but ultimately they couldn't for whatever reason. Sometimes their fault, sometimes, many times not. Have you ever come into that, and how do you manage those transitions? Are they usually fairly collegial, or are they usually very difficult transitions when one founder isn't meeting the expectations of the other co-founders?
I think in the experiences I've had, they're never easy, but and I've seen some, actually, I was on the board of another company where it was where the board had a vote pretty much, and that had to remove the CEO, and that was a tough thing to do. It's uncomfortable, and then transition to finding another CEO, and that was only one situation. But I think in a lot of cases too, if I'm one of the founders, or I'm not, if I'm not meeting the hitting the numbers or the results, or that we've all set out as our goals, then we have to say, is it the person, or is it the strategy, or is it just the situation? It's the and then because the last thing you want to do, I've had, like I mentioned before, I've had cases when I got out of the way of something and brought a real professional in at the right time. They did a much better job than I did. So sometimes I'm thinking, man, I should have done that sooner than later. So you really have to kind of look at yourself from the outside, because then you got to look at your shares, not your ego, but look at the value of the company. Because if you're going to be, I want the shares to be, the company to be worth as much as we can, not so much what my title is going to be when we end. I really don't care about that.
Great, thank you. There was a question earlier. I'm not sure if it might have missed it. It's basically, do you have techniques or a structure outline to help you execute? Like, how do you organize your operating plan?
I don't really have any one way to just say this is how I do it. And it really depends on what the timing of because there are some times when things are so like gray, or I would say the clouds are so cloudy, you're really not sure what to do yet. And I think that just takes some time for the smoke to clear, or the clouds to clear up. And you just got to keep pounding away at different things. And for the faint at heart, watching an entrepreneur really bounce all over the place until they find something that sticks can be scary for some people who are structured. So, and generally when you, depends on how many people in your team, you're going to have some people that are going to be more structured. So I try to balance out the people who have the ability, to focus longer than me, and who can actually, read a whole book and go through and do the research, and also having the good understanding with them and saying, listen, I'm going to be a little, crazy for this time period, but work with me, and then let's work, together as a team. You bring me some research, but just don't get mad if I don't do everything you want me to do. Because and then once you find that lane, or once you find that path, then I think it's real important to have some good reporting, some structure. I've also started to implement some using some of the OKR methods.
What is that?
Objectives and key key results, and there's several systems that help you kind of manage those, the reporting part. I use I've always been using a task management system called Asana for a while. And Asana really helps me organize projects and tasks. And then you can do the OKRs in Asana too. There are other tools as well, Basecamp, and I don't know what do you guys recommend for your classes, but just to help you organize some of the different the projects and the movement of things. But we use several tools in our company today, not just one tool, to manage the different processes of running the business. But I try to use that. Asana is one of the tools I've used for a long time to try to help keep my thoughts down, because I constantly am thinking of things and I have to write them down somewhere. And it doesn't work on the yellow pad. I outgrew that a long time ago.
You mean the legal pad?
Yeah. Because eventually you get too many.
Office Depot is going to be sad to hear that.
I know, but then you got 50 of them stacked there, and well, where was that note I wrote it? I have no idea where it is now. It's somewhere in that stack. That's not effective anymore. You got to put it in a system. You can search things and organize. Yeah.
That's great. So there's another question.
So, I think with the executive summary, what's the most pertinent information? I think you got to start off really quickly explaining, what problem are you trying to solve? You got to resonate with a potential investor or a stakeholder. So you got to get across what is it that you're trying to do, and can that, obviously it's great when they can relate to it too. Say, I know exactly what you're trying to do. I think that's a great idea. How come I didn't think about that? That's so you got to get that across on the first page or two at least, to and then I've had several that I've looked at that just say, okay, well, or when they told me what they did initially, I wasn't excited, but then I guess as long as they can keep my attention long enough, I've had times when I get to the end and I say, okay, now I get it really what you're trying to do, because sometimes you can really sell yourself, or maybe you have a demo or something you can do at the end to really do the wow factor. So I guess then at you got to get to how are you going to not only the problem, but how are you going to make money, is the because obviously the odds are not with us, any new venture, the risk is very high. So remember, how are you mitigating that risk too by your approach and your product? So why should I invest some very risky money into you? And why are you going to be able to do this where someone else can't? Or why are you going to do it better than the other person? So what's your barrier to entry too? You got to get that across. Why are you going to be so special?
Great, thank you. I have a question. The process, I'm sorry, well, that's okay, yeah. So oftentimes product development can take more than a brief period. It can take a couple of years in some cases, and market conditions and technologies evolve around you very rapidly. Has there been a situation, whether it's augmented reality or Bitcoin or distributed ledger or cloud computing or anything that came along and it wasn't originally part of your product development plan, and maybe your customer wasn't asking for it initially, but you had to kind of scramble quickly to incorporate it, that you had to have that as part of your product plan or the product roadmap or whatever, because it took hold so quickly, and you had to react quickly to say, oh, we need that. And the reason I ask is frequently entrepreneurs chase the next shiny object, and you see they drop a bunch of concepts of enabling technology or disruptive technologies in their business planning, but it doesn't seem to be an organic part of their real product vision. But have you had experience with that?
Yes, I've had some experiences where I got really excited about something and pushed it ahead of the customer demand, asking for it. And some cases it's been I was right, and other cases it was too early, or I just picked the wrong solution or the wrong partner, or so I guess now at my older age, I've been trying to taper and do a little a slower approach. So what we try to do with that is we bring our customers into a what we call our steering meetings, and we also try to pick the right people at the customers, because some customers don't have. If you ask someone without any technical knowledge or vision from an end user, they're not going to really tell you what's the right things that you're going to need. But once you've identified those champions in the organization, and once you get in the door, and that's why it's important to get that footprint more than one customer. You need a few customers in there to get that good diversity of feedback. But listening to them and then sharing some of those ideas and doing it in such a way that you're not pushing it on them, you're letting them either experiment or you can demo. Sometimes it's education too. You got to bring them up to speed and show them here's what's possible, because sometimes they didn't realize that that's something that they could even do until you showed it to them. So we've had a lot of that because we're some of the things we're doing on the edge. They won't even be able to think about it unless they see it. So visually, they got to see something in order to give a reaction. So I like looking at their faces. So I call that as my focus groups, rather than doing, we can't afford to do a real focus groups. They're really expensive and they take a long time. But as entrepreneurs, we do focus groups. Every demo you do is a focus group, almost. Every time you look at someone's face and their reaction, you show them something. You're learning, you're getting feedback. So
great. We have time for, I think, this last question that's typed up, and then we'll wind things down, get ready for our second part.
And just so so what is the point, the inflection point? You say, hey, this is going to work, and that comes at various times, and I would say coming on 4 or 5 years of my current venture, and this one, I've had ups and downs, wondering if this is going to work. Obviously, before in March, when all this was going down, I wasn't really quite sure what was going to happen, what was going to work, if anything. I think I think it's a lot of things need to happen. You get the sense that the team is functioning well. The team is staying, because if you can't keep your core team together when you're in the middle of these of the startups, that is key. You want to retain the core brain power that you have, and that's another. So if you start losing people, then you got to wonder: Are you losing them because they don't see the vision? You're not communicating. Do they not share the vision with the company? And then the other key is are you winning? Are you getting sales? And then seeing the customers actually adopting your product or your solution and using it and getting value from it and really talking and getting excited, when they see you, versus having a customer who's unhappy. Is nothing worse than going into an unhappy customer and trying to turn that dynamic and making them into, where they do backflips when they see you because they're so happy what you're able to do for them. So that's just, and that gets to be fun when you get the machine starts to get going and you start to win. When you're winning more deals, you're getting getting paid more, and people are happy to pay you more if you're adding the value. There's nothing better of a feeling of a winning team and how it feels. It's no different than a football team, a baseball team, or any sort of team. You got to win them on the scoreboard.
Great. I lied. I'm going to ask you one other quick question, if you don't mind providing a quick answer. Did you go right from college into being an entrepreneur, or did you have a stint in the corporate sector? Or how did you make it into your first venture, that transition between college and being an entrepreneur?
Well, while I was doing some odds and end jobs between working at Sears and I was a painter too. I would paint houses inside, and one of my designer, I had a designer lady who hired me to do some of the inside small jobs. But I worked for her as a controller or as an accountant, starting off as my first real job with her, and then I helped her set up a job costing system, which my first time setting one up. That she gave me the flexibility because she didn't know anything about this stuff. So I helped her set up the budgeting and the costing estimates, and that gave me a lot of great experience of setting up a chart of accounts, a general ledger, how to balance that made all my accounting classes make sense. Finally, then I finally understood what all the accounting logic or the theory taught me. It didn't teach me much about practical, but setting up an accounting system really, was my first opportunity to learn about how it works. So, and then I worked for another accounting or software companies to help install other systems. I did a couple odds and end jobs. So the more experience I got from setting up different systems from different types of enterprises, I did point of sale stuff, I did wholesale type of systems, and as a consultant for a while. So I think being a consultant was very helpful of learning how to solve problems and how to think on your feet and come up with a solution, and going out looking for third party systems and products to integrate with as well, which gave me a lot of good experience in the early days before I became, an entrepreneur working for myself.
And did that point you to the unmet need in the marketplace, or the opportunity, that consultant period? Is that where you saw the opportunity to jump into?
Yes, because I was actually working as a consultant when the whole web hosting thing came out with Highway, because I was working for a company that wanted a website, and that was one was the first account that we had was willing to pay us for putting a website up for them, and that gave us our first start. Plus, they gave me an office space the size of a closet, but I had my own office that they're building. That was my first office too. It was 176 square feet. So
You had your own server closet. That's great.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for attending. And Scott, thank you for sharing your insights and part of your journey.